Mr. Hayes, you can't conquer the world on an empty stomach. Amani Carter's voice rings out as she tosses fresh herbs into a sizzling pan, her confident smile lighting up the sleek kitchen of Greenwich's grandest mansion. Harrison Hayes, the billionaire tech mogul, leans against the counter, captivated by her grace and the aroma of her cooking. Try this, she says, offering a spoonful of creamy truffle soup, her dark eyes sparkling. Can a single dish melt a heart hardened by loss? Before we dive into this delicious love story, hit that subscribe button to catch our latest videos fresh from the oven. Drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Will Imani's culinary magic thaw Harrison's icy walls? Or will secrets and scandals spoil their recipe for love? Stick around to find out. You won't want to miss the sizzling twists. The wind howled outside the towering windows of the Hayes mansion, a sprawling fortress of glass and stone perched on a Greenwich hilltop, its elegance as cold as the Connecticut winter. Inside, the grand hallways echoed with silence, their marble floors gleaming under chandeliers that cast more shadow than light. It was a home that felt more like a mausoleum, a monument to wealth and loss. Harrison Hayes, 30 years old and burdened with a fortune most could only dream of, stood alone in his office, the city skyline sprawling below, like a glittering chessboard he'd long mastered. His sharp blue eyes, framed by dark hair that fell just past his collar, traced the horizon. But his thoughts were elsewhere, trapped in the wreckage of a helicopter crash 3 years prior, the one that stole his parents and left him to carry Hayes Innovations alone. The weight of that tragedy clung to him like damp fog, seeping into every decision, every sleepless night. He'd buried himself in work, turning the family's tech empire into a global juggernaut. But success couldn't fill the void. His sister Charlotte, a fashion entrepreneur with a tongue as sharp as her stilettos, was the only family he had left, but their bond had frayed. Her vibrant, reckless energy clashed with his calculated restraint, their conversations often ending in bitter silences. Just last week, she'd stormed out after accusing him of living like a ghost in this God-forsaken museum. He hadn't argued. She wasn't entirely wrong. A sharp buzz from the intercom broke his reverie. "Mr. Hayes, the candidate for the chef position, is here," came the clipped voice of Mrs. Langley, his housekeeper, whose efficiency rivaled a military general's. Harrison sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The board of directors had been relentless, insisting that a man of his stature needed to host proper business dinners, not rely on takeout from Greenwich's finest delis. "Your habit of serving pizza to investors is an embarrassment," they'd said at the last meeting, their disapproval as pointed as their tailored suits. Harrison found the idea of a personal chef frivolous, an intrusion into his carefully controlled world, but he'd relented to silence their nagging. "Send her in," he replied, his voice low, almost reluctant. He adjusted his charcoal blazer, smoothing the fabric as if preparing for battle. The office door opened, and Imani Carter stepped inside, her presence like a sudden burst of sunlight in a room accustomed to dusk. At 21, she carried herself with a quiet confidence, her dark curls pulled into a neat bun, her deep brown eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and resolve. Her simple navy dress hugged her frame, professional yet unpretentious, and in her hand, she held a leather portfolio, its edges worn from use. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice warm but steady, extending a hand. "I'm Imani Carter." Harrison hesitated, his instinct to avoid physical contact warring with politeness. He shook her hand briefly, his grip firm but fleeting, and gestured to the leather chair across his mahogany desk. "Sit, Miss Carter," he said, his tone clipped as he sank into his chair, picking up her resume to avoid her gaze. "You come highly recommended. Culinary Institute, top of your class. Impressive." Imani smiled, undeterred by his frostiness. "Thank you, but I should be honest, Mr. Hayes. My real education happened in my grandfather's kitchen in Harlem. He taught me that food isn't just fuel. It's a way to touch the heart." Her words hung in the air, bold and unexpected, like a melody in a silent room. Harrison's eyes flicked up, meeting hers for the first time. Most people shrank under his scrutiny, intimidated by his wealth or the cold intensity he'd perfected over the years. But Imani held his gaze, her expression open, almost challenging. He cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. I'm not looking to have my heart touched, Miss Carter. I need someone who can prepare meals for business functions. Nothing more. His voice was sharper than intended, a defense against the unfamiliar warmth her words stirred. Imani's smile didn't falter. With all due respect, Mr. Hayes, even business meals need soul. You're feeding people who make decisions that shape your company. A good meal can soften edges, open minds. I can deliver that. Harrison leaned back, caught off guard by her directness. He was used to deference, to people tiptoeing around his authority, but this young woman spoke with a conviction that bordered on audacity. He glanced at her resume again, buying time. 3 years at a Michelin-starred restaurant in New York, glowing references and a scholarship to the Culinary Institute. Her credentials were impeccable, but it was her presence, vibrant, unyielding, that unsettled him. Tell me about your experience, he said, steering the conversation back to safer ground. I started cooking with my grandfather, Amos, when I was 6, Imani began, her voice softening with memory. He owned a small diner in Harlem, nothing fancy, but every dish was made with love. Grits with shrimp, cornbread that melted in your mouth, and peach cobbler that could make you cry. He taught me that food tells a story and connects people. After he passed, I went to the Culinary Institute to honor him, to learn how to tell those stories on a bigger stage. She paused, her fingers brushing the edge of her portfolio. I worked at Le Jardin for 3 years, handling high-pressure services, creating menus for elite clients, but I never forgot what Amos said. Cook with your heart, and you'll never go hungry. Harrison's chest tightened, an unfamiliar ache stirring at her words. Connection was a luxury he'd long forsaken, a risk he couldn't afford after the crash left him to rebuild his world alone. I don't need stories, Miss Carter, he said, his voice colder now, as if to push back the warmth creeping in. I need efficiency, professionalism. Can you deliver that? Imani's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained. I can deliver both, Mr. Hayes. Professionalism and soul aren't mutually exclusive. You hired me to feed your guests, but I'm betting you could use a decent meal yourself. When was the last time you ate something that wasn't from a cardboard box? Her tone was teasing, but her gaze was piercing, as if she could see through the walls he'd built. He stiffened, her boldness bordering on insolence. Yet there was no malice in her eyes, only a spark of challenge that made his pulse quicken. You're awfully presumptuous, he said, but the faintest hint of a smirk tugged at his lips, betraying him. Imani leaned forward unfazed. Maybe, but I'm good at what I do. Give me a chance and I'll prove it. The room fell silent, the only sound the distant whistle of the wind outside. Harrison studied her, torn between his instinct to dismiss this intrusion and the nagging curiosity her presence sparked. The board's pressure echoed in his mind, their voices a chorus of disapproval. But it was something else, something about Imani's unyielding warmth, her refusal to shrink, that tipped the scale. When can you start? He asked abruptly, surprising even himself. Imani's eyes widened, a flicker of triumph crossing her face. Tomorrow, if that works for you. Harrison nodded, already regretting the decision. Mrs. Langley will show you the kitchen and your quarters in the guest wing. It's been prepared for your use. He stood, signaling the end of the interview, but Imani rose with a grace that held his attention a moment too long. Thank you, Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice softer now, but no less confident. You won't regret this. As she turned to leave, her portfolio tucked under her arm, Harrison found himself watching her, the echo of her words, food touches the heart, lingering like an uninvited guest. He turned back to the skyline, the city's lights blurring as a strange unease settled over him. For the first time in 3 years, the mansion felt just a fraction less cold, and that shift, however small, terrified him more than he cared to admit. The Hayes mansion woke to the scent of something unfamiliar, warm, sweet, and utterly alive. In the sprawling kitchen, where stainless steel gleamed under soft morning light, Imani Carter moved with the precision of a dancer and the heart of a storyteller. Her dark curls were tucked beneath a white bandana, and her navy apron bore faint flour smudges as she whisked a bowl of batter. The rhythmic clink of her spoon against ceramic cutting through the mansion's usual silence. It was her first day, and she was determined to make it count. The cold grandeur of this place, with its endless marble and muted echoes, wouldn't intimidate her. She'd grown up in Harlem's clamor, where every dish carried a pulse, a memory. Here, she'd bring that same fire, whether Harrison Hayes liked it or not. Upstairs, Harrison stood before his mirror, knotting a silk tie with mechanical precision. The memory of yesterday's interview gnawed at him. Imani's bold words, her unyielding gaze. Food touches the heart. He'd dismissed it as sentimental nonsense, yet it lingered, an unwelcome echo in his carefully ordered world. He hadn't wanted a chef, hadn't wanted anyone breaching the fortress of his solitude, but the board's insistence and Imani's audacity had left him little choice. Now the faint aroma drifting from below tugged at him, stirring a curiosity he resented. Coffee was his ritual, black and bitter, consumed alone at his desk. But today something else called. He descended the grand staircase, his polished loafers silent on the marble, and paused at the kitchen's threshold. Imani stood at the counter, slicing strawberries with a knife that flashed like quicksilver, her movements fluid, almost hypnotic. A plate waited nearby, golden French toast dusted with powdered sugar, topped with ruby-red berries and a drizzle of maple syrup that caught the light. The sight was jarring in this sterile space, a burst of color against the mansion's monochrome. Imani looked up, her brown eyes bright with a smile that felt like a challenge. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I hope you're hungry." Harrison stiffened, caught off guard by her ease as if she belonged here. "I don't usually eat breakfast," he said, his voice clipped, hovering at the doorway. "Just coffee. Black?" Imani raised an eyebrow, undeterred, and slid a steaming mug across the counter. "Got you covered, but you're missing out if you skip this." She gestured to the plate, her tone teasing but firm. "You can't conquer the world on an empty stomach, Mr. Hayes." Her words, bold and familiar, sent a spark of irritation through him. No one spoke to him like that, not employees, not even Charlotte. Yet there was no malice in her voice, only a warmth that made his chest tighten. He approached the counter cautiously, as if the plate might bite, and sat on a bar stool, the leather creaking under his weight. The French toast looked alive, its edges crisp, the berries glistening. He picked up a fork, hesitating. "You made this from scratch?" he asked, his skepticism a shield. "Every bit," Imani replied, leaning against the counter, her arms crossed. "Sourdough bread, fresh eggs, a touch of cinnamon. The strawberries are from a local farm, picked yesterday. Try it, I dare you." Her smile was a dare, too, and Harrison felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Amusement, perhaps, or defiance. He cut a small piece, the fork piercing the soft bread, and brought it to his mouth. The first bite was a revelation, warm, buttery, with a tart burst of berries and the faintest spice. He couldn't stop the low hum of appreciation that escaped him, a sound so foreign he barely recognized it. Imani's laugh was soft, triumphant. "See? Not so bad, right?" Harrison met her gaze, his usual defenses faltering under her infectious energy. "It's adequate," he said, but the corner of his mouth twitched, betraying him. He took another bite, larger this time, and for a moment the weight of his world, Hayes Innovations, the board, the ghosts of his parents, seemed lighter. As he ate, Imani moved around the kitchen, chopping herbs with a steady rhythm, her voice filling the silence. "My granddad, Amos, used to make French toast on Sundays. He'd tell stories about Harlem in the 70s, how he'd cook for musicians after their gigs. Said food brought people together, no matter who they were." She glanced at Harrison, her eyes searching. "Have you ever had a meal like that? One that sticks with you?" Harrison paused, fork midair. Memories of his mother's rare dinners, roast chicken, laughter, his father's hand on her shoulder, flashed through him, sharp and painful. After the crash, meals became transactions, fuel for survival. "Not in a long time," he said, his voice quieter now, almost raw. He set the fork down, the intimacy of the question unsettling him. Imani nodded as if she understood more than he'd said and turned back to her herbs, giving him space. The moment passed, but the kitchen felt different. Less like a stage for his isolation, more like a place where life could happen. Harrison finished the toast, the plate now empty, save for a smear of syrup. This was, good, he admitted, standing. But don't expect me to make this a habit. Imani grinned, wiping down the counter. We'll see, Mr. Hayes. I'm just getting started. That evening, Harrison worked late in his office, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across the room. Papers on quantum computing and market projections littered his desk, but his focus wavered. The memory of breakfast, of Imani's laughter, kept intruding. He rubbed his eyes, annoyed at himself. She was an employee, nothing more. Yet the mansion, once a silent refuge, now hummed with her presence, and he wasn't sure how to feel about it. A soft knock broke his thoughts. The door opened, and Imani appeared, balancing a tray with a covered dish and a glass of water. Her apron was gone, her curls loose around her shoulders, but her eyes held the same spark. Sorry to interrupt, she said, setting the tray on a side table. Mrs. Langley said you're pulling an all-nighter. Figured you'd need something better than vending machine snacks. Harrison leaned back, his brow furrowing. You don't need to do this. It's not in your job description. Imani shrugged, uncovering the dish to reveal a steaming plate of spaghetti, the sauce vibrant with basil and garlic. Maybe not, but I don't let people starve on my watch. This is just pasta with pesto, but it's warm and it's real. Eat. Her tone was firm, almost maternal, but her smile softened it. He stared at the plate, the aroma pulling him in despite himself. You're persistent, he said, a grudging respect in his voice. Imani crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. Comes with the territory. My granddad used to say, feed the body and the soul follows. You look like you could use both, Mr. Hayes. Her words, gentle but piercing, hit closer to home than he cared to admit. He was a man who controlled billions. Yet here was this young woman, barely out of school, seeing through his armor with unnerving clarity. Harrison picked up the fork, twirling the pasta with a precision that mirrored his approach to life. The first bite was a burst of flavor, earthy, fresh, alive. He ate in silence, aware of Imani watching him, her presence a quiet anchor in the room. Why do you care? He asked suddenly, his voice low, almost accusing. You're here to cook, not fix me. Imani's expression softened, but she didn't flinch. I'm not trying to fix you, Mr. Hayes. I just know what it's like to carry heavy things alone. Food's my way of lightening the load, even if it's just for a moment. Her honesty disarmed him, leaving him without a retort. He nodded, taking another bite, the warmth of the meal spreading through him like a small rebellion against his usual cold routine. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. Get some rest, okay? The world will still be there tomorrow. The door closed softly behind her, and Harrison sat alone, the pasta half-eaten, the water untouched. The mansion's silence returned, but it was different now, laced with the memory of her voice, her care. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, a single thought taking root. Imani Carter was dangerous, not to his empire, but to the walls he'd built around his heart. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he wanted to keep them standing. The Hayes mansion, once a silent monolith, had begun to hum with subtle life. In the weeks since Imani Carter's arrival, the kitchen had transformed into a sanctuary of warmth, its sterile surfaces softened by the sense of fresh bread and simmering sauces. Imani moved through her duties with a quiet grace, her presence a steady pulse in the mansion's cold heart. Harrison Hayes, however, remained a fortress unto himself, his days consumed by Hayes innovations and his nights by the ghosts of his past. Yet her meals, each a small act of defiance against his isolation, had begun to chip away at his defenses. The French toast, the late-night pasta, her unyielding warmth, they lingered in his mind, uninvited but impossible to ignore. It was a crisp Saturday morning, the kind where frost clung to the Greenwich Hills and the mansion's windows glowed with pale sunlight. Harrison, free from meetings for once, wandered downstairs earlier than usual, drawn by the faint clinking of dishes and a sweet, spicy aroma that promised something new. The kitchen was alive with Imani's energy. She stood at the counter, her dark curls tucked under a red bandana, rolling out dough with practiced ease. Flour dusted her apron, and a bowl of cinnamon sugar filling sat nearby, its scent weaving through the air like a warm embrace. She glanced up, her brown eyes bright with surprise. "Mr. Hayes, you're up early for a weekend. Couldn't resist the smell, huh?" Harrison paused at the threshold, his usual reserve warring with the pull of her smile. "I couldn't sleep," he said, his voice low, almost reluctant. He wore a simple sweater and slacks, a rare departure from his tailored suits, and the informality made him feel strangely exposed. Amani's gaze softened, but she didn't press. "Well, you're just in time. I'm making cinnamon rolls, my granddad's recipe. Want to help?" The question caught him off guard. Cooking was as foreign to him as laughter in this house, a relic of a life before the crash. "I don't cook," he said, his tone clipped, but Imani's laugh, light and unforced, cut through his resistance. "Everyone can cook, Mr. Hayes. It's just following instructions, and you're good at that." She beckoned him over, her confidence infectious. "Come on, I'll show you. No boardroom required." Harrison hesitated, his instinct to retreat battling a curiosity he couldn't name. Something about her ease, her refusal to treat him like the untouchable billionaire, drew him forward. He stepped to the counter, the warmth of the kitchen enveloping him. Amani handed him an apron, her fingers brushing his as she passed it over. The brief contact sent a jolt through him, unexpected and disarming. He tied the apron awkwardly, feeling out of place but oddly intrigued. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost boyish. "Start with the dough," Imani said, guiding his hands to the flour-dusted ball. "Knead it like this. Push, fold, turn." She demonstrated her movements fluidly, and Harrison followed, his hands clumsy but determined. Their fingers brushed again as she adjusted his technique, and he froze, the warmth of her touch lingering. "You're a natural," she teased, stepping back to let him work. "Just don't overthink it. Feel the dough." Harrison focused, the rhythmic motion grounding him in a way his spreadsheets never could. The kitchen filled with their quiet banter, Imani's stories of her granddad's diner, Harrison's rare, hesitant replies about his childhood. For the first time in years, he laughed, a low, unguarded sound that startled him. Imani's eyes sparkled with delight. "See? You're not as serious as you think." The moment felt fragile, precious, like a flame that could flicker out with the slightest misstep. They spread the cinnamon filling, rolled the dough, and slid the tray into the oven, the kitchen now thick with anticipation. As they cleaned up, Harrison found himself watching her, the way her smile reached her eyes, the way she made this cold mansion feel like a home. "Why do you do this?" he asked suddenly, wiping flour from his hands. "Cooking for someone like me, in a place like this. You could be anywhere." Imani paused, her cloth stilling on the counter. "Because food matters, Mr. Hayes. It's how I show up for people. And you." She hesitated, choosing her words. "You look like you need someone to show up for you." Her honesty hit him like a quiet thunderclap, exposing a truth he'd buried deep. He opened his mouth to respond, but the oven timer dinged, saving him from words he wasn't ready to speak. The rolls emerged golden and fragrant, and they sat at the counter, sharing one warm from the tray. The sweet, spicy bite was perfection, and Harrison's small nod of approval drew a triumphant grin from Imani. "Told you," she said, licking sugar from her fingers. For a moment, the world outside the company, the loss, the loneliness didn't exist. There was only this kitchen, this woman, this fleeting warmth. But the fragile peace was shattered days later. Harrison woke one morning, burning with fever, his body heavy, his vision swimming. He tried to push through, stumbling to his office, but the world tilted, and he collapsed against his desk, papers scattering. Mrs. Langley found him, her usual composure cracking as she called for Imani. "He's burning up," she said, her voice tight. Imani rushed in, her apron still tied from prepping lunch, and knelt beside him. "Mr. Hayes, can you hear me?" Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed worry. Harrison mumbled something incoherent, his pride warring with the haze of illness. Imani didn't hesitate. With Mrs. Langley's help, she got him to his bedroom, the vast space as impersonal as a hotel suite. She brewed a remedy from her granddad's recipe, ginger, honey, and herbs, its sharp scent cutting through the fog in his mind. "Drink this," she said, holding a steaming mug to his lips. Her hand was cool against his forehead, her touch an anchor. He obeyed, too weak to argue, the warmth of the broth soothing his aching throat. Through the night, Amani stayed, changing cool cloths on his brow, coaxing him to sip broth when he stirred. Her presence was a quiet strength, her soft humming, a Harlem lullaby filling the room. By dawn, his fever had broken, and he woke to find her asleep in a chair, her head resting on her arms. The sight stirred something deep, a gratitude he didn't know how to voice. "You didn't have to stay," he rasped, his voice rough but gentle. Imani stirred, blinking awake. "Couldn't leave you like that," she said, stretching with a tired smile. "You scared me, Mr. Hayes." Her honesty, her care, pierced him. He wanted to say more, to thank her, but the words caught, unfamiliar and heavy. The moment was broken by a sharp knock. The door swung open, and Charlotte Hayes strode in, her designer coat billowing like a storm cloud. Her green eyes, so like Harrison's but sharper, took in the scene. Amani's disheveled state, Harrison's pale face. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice laced with suspicion. "Mrs. Langley said you were sick, but this looks cozy." Harrison sat up, his strength returning with his irritation. "I was ill. Imani helped. That's all." His tone was final, but Charlotte's gaze lingered on Imani, who stood smoothing her apron. "I'll check on lunch," Imani said, her voice calm but guarded, and slipped out, leaving a tense silence. Charlotte crossed her arms, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "She's your chef, Harrison, not your nurse. Or is there something else going on?" Her words were a blade, cutting at the fragile connection he'd felt. Harrison's jaw tightened. "She did her job. You're reading too much into it." But even as he spoke, he knew it was a lie. Imani was more than an employee, and Charlotte's arrival had cast a shadow over the warmth he'd begun to crave. As Charlotte launched into a lecture about his health and the company, Harrison's thoughts drifted to Imani, to the cinnamon rolls, to the way her care had reached past his walls. The mansion was no longer just a tomb, it was a battleground where his heart and his fears would soon collide. And Imani, with her fire and her heart, was at the center of it all. The Hayes mansion buzzed with an electric undercurrent, its usual silence drowned by the flurry of preparations for the Hayes Innovations annual charity gala. Tonight, Manhattan's elite would descend upon the opulent Heritage Hotel, their wallets open for a cause, their eyes sharp for scandal. In the mansion's kitchen, Imani Carter was a whirlwind of focus, her dark curls pinned back, her apron a canvas of spice stains. She orchestrated a four-course menu with the precision of a conductor, her team of sous chefs chopping, searing, and plating under her steady command. The air hummed with the aromas of truffle-infused pumpkin soup, herb-crusted beef Wellington, and lavender creme brulee, a symphony of flavors designed to dazzle the 200 guests. Imani's heart raced, not from nerves but from the thrill of creation. This was her stage, her chance to prove she was more than a hired hand in Harrison Hayes's cold empire. Upstairs, Harrison adjusted his black bow tie in the mirror, his reflection a study in control. The gala was a high-stakes ritual, investors to charm, rivals to outmaneuver, and a legacy to uphold. Yet his thoughts kept drifting to Imani, to the warmth of her cinnamon rolls, the quiet strength of her care during his illness. Her presence had cracked the ice around his heart, and tonight he'd see her in a new light, far from the kitchen's safe confines. The thought both thrilled and unnerved him. A knock interrupted his reverie, Mrs. Langley holding a tablet with the final seating chart. "Miss Carter asked for your approval," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes knowing. Harrison nodded, scanning the list, his pulse quickening at the mention of Imani's name. Downstairs, Imani slipped out of her apron and into a borrowed emerald gown, its silk hugging her curves like a whispered secret. The dress, a gift from a friend at Le Jardin, transformed her from chef to vision, her dark skin glowing against the rich green. She unpinned her curls, letting them cascade over her shoulders, and caught her reflection in the staff room mirror. For a moment, she was a girl from Harlem, dreaming beyond her granddad's diner. But tonight she was Imani Carter, the woman who'd feed Manhattan's elite, and perhaps the man who'd begun to occupy her thoughts. The Heritage Hotel's ballroom was a spectacle of crystal chandeliers and gold-trimmed tables, the crowd a sea of tuxedos and sequins. Harrison moved through it with practiced ease, shaking hands, exchanging calculated smiles. His sister Charlotte was there, her crimson gown a bold contrast to her sharp green eyes, which missed nothing. She'd been distant since her accusations about Imani, but her presence tonight was non-negotiable. Family unity was part of the Hayes brand. Harrison's gaze, however, kept straying to the kitchen doors, where Imani emerged periodically, checking on her staff with a quiet authority that drew his eye. The first course, pumpkin soup with a truffle foam, hit the tables and a murmur of delight rippled through the room. Guests leaned forward, spoons dipping into the velvety warmth, their praise loud enough to reach Imani's ears as she hovered near the service entrance. She caught Harrison's eye across the room, and he raised his glass in a subtle toast, his lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. Her heart skipped, but she nodded back, professional yet warm, before retreating to oversee the main course. As the beef Wellington was served, its pastry golden and meat tender, the room erupted in applause. Harrison, seated at the head table, took a bite and closed his eyes briefly, the flavors a testament to Imani's genius. He leaned toward an investor, murmuring, "Our chef's outdone herself." The man nodded, impressed. But Charlotte, seated nearby, pursed her lips, her gaze flicking toward the kitchen with a mix of suspicion and something deeper. Resentment, perhaps. Harrison ignored her, his attention drawn to Imani as she stepped into the ballroom, her gown catching the light like a jewel. The band struck up a slow waltz, and the dance floor filled with swaying couples. Harrison saw his chance. He crossed the room, his heart pounding in a way no boardroom ever provoked, and stopped before Imani, who was speaking with a server. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice low but firm, "may I have this dance?" The room seemed to hush, eyes turning their way, investors, socialites, and Charlotte. Imani's breath caught, her eyes wide with surprise, but she recovered quickly, a smile tugging at her lips. "You sure you want to dance with your chef, Mr. Hayes?" she teased, but she placed her hand in his, her touch sending a spark through him. He led her to the floor, one hand on her waist, the other clasping hers, and they moved in sync. The waltz a delicate balance of restraint and intimacy. The emerald gown swirled around her, and Harrison couldn't look away. "You're not just my chef, Imani," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the music. "Not tonight." Her eyes met his, a question in their depths, and for a moment the world was just them, their steps, their breath, the heat of her hand in his. But Charlotte's stare burned from the sidelines, and whispers from nearby tables, cousins, board members, pricked at Imani's awareness. She was an outsider here, her place precarious. The song ended, and Harrison led her toward the hotel's garden terrace, seeking a moment away from prying eyes. The night air was cool, fairy lights twinkling in the trees, and Imani shivered slightly. Harrison shrugged off his jacket, draping it over her shoulders, his fingers lingering a moment too long. "You were incredible tonight," he said, his voice rough with something unspoken. "The food, the way you carry yourself, it's more than I expected." Imani looked up, her expression torn between pride and caution. "I'm just doing my job, Mr. Hayes. But thank you." He stepped closer, the space between them charged. "It's Harrison," he corrected, his eyes searching hers. "And it's more than a job. You've changed this place. Changed me." Her breath hitched, and for a heartbeat, they stood suspended, the gala's hum distant. Then, as if pulled by a force neither could resist, Harrison leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was both tentative and electric. It was a question, a confession, and Imani answered, her hands resting lightly on his chest, her warmth melting his restraint. The world fell away, until a twig snapped nearby, and they broke apart, breathless. Imani's eyes darted toward the sound, her face a mix of wonder and worry. "We shouldn't have done that," she whispered, stepping back, Harrison's jacket slipping from her shoulders. "You're my boss. It's complicated." Harrison's jaw tightened, his heart still racing. "I don't care about complicated," he said, but the doubt in her eyes stopped him. "Imani, I—" She shook her head, her voice firm but soft. "We're not thinking straight. The gala? The music? It's messing with us. I need to get back to the kitchen." She turned, her gown catching the moonlight as she hurried inside, leaving Harrison alone in the garden, his lips tingling, his mind a storm. He'd crossed a line, and the consequences loomed like shadows. Back in the ballroom, the dessert course, creme brulee with a perfect caramel crust, drew gasps of delight, but Imani barely registered the praise. Her hands trembled as she directed her team, her mind replaying the kiss, the feel of Harrison's hands, the risk of it all. Charlotte approached, her smile tight, her words dripping with venom. "Quite a performance tonight, Imani. The food, the dance, very ambitious." Imani met her gaze, refusing to shrink. "Just doing what I was hired for, Ms. Hayes." Charlotte's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more, gliding away like a predator biding its time. As the gala wound down, Harrison stood by the ballroom's entrance, accepting congratulations, his mind elsewhere. The kiss had changed everything, and Imani's retreat had left him unsteady. He caught sight of her across the room, directing the cleanup, her professionalism a mask he now recognized. The night had been a triumph. Her food had won the crowd, his speech had secured donations, but the real trial was personal. He'd tasted something with Imani that went beyond her cooking, something he wasn't ready to lose. But Charlotte's watchful eyes and the whispers of his relatives warned him. This was only the beginning, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. The morning after the gala, the Hayes mansion felt like a battlefield, its grandeur tainted by the sharp sting of betrayal. Imani Carter woke in her quarters in the guest wing, her mind still reeling from the kiss in the hotel garden. Harrison's lips warm against hers, the reckless pull of something she knew she shouldn't want. She'd fled back to the kitchen, hiding behind her duties, but the memory clung to her like the scent of lavender from the gala's dessert. Now, as dawn painted the Greenwich Hills in soft gold, she stood at her window clutching a mug of chamomile tea, her heart heavy with dread. She was a chef, not a socialite, and crossing that line with her employer could cost her everything she'd fought for: her reputation, her dreams, her place in a world that rarely welcomed women like her. Downstairs, Harrison Hayes sat in his office, the city skyline a blur beyond his window. The gala had been a triumph, record donations, glowing reviews of Imani's menu, but the kiss had upended his carefully controlled world. He'd felt alive in that moment, her warmth breaking through years of frost, but her retreat had left him adrift. He wanted to find her, to speak, but the weight of his position, the billionaire, the boss, held him back. His phone buzzed, shattering the silence. A text from his PR director, urgent. "Check Society Beat. Now." Harrison opened the link and his blood ran cold. The headline screamed, "Tech Tycoon's Torrid Affair. Harrison Hayes and his ambitious chef." Below were photos, him and Imani dancing at the gala, their bodies close, her head tilted toward him in the garden. And, most damning, their kiss, captured in grainy but unmistakable detail. The article was a venomous smear, painting Imani as a gold digger who'd cooked her way into the billionaire's bed. It quoted anonymous sources, claiming she'd been hired for her looks, not her skills, and speculated on her motives with lurid glee. Harrison's jaw clenched, fury rising at the invasion, the lies. But a deeper fear gnawed at him. What this would do to Imani. He stood, ready to find her, when a knock came. Mrs. Langley entered, her face pale, holding a tablet. "Miss Carter's seen it, sir. She's in the library." Harrison nodded, his heart pounding, and strode out, the mansion's opulence mocking his turmoil. The library, with its towering bookshelves and leather-bound tomes, was Imani's refuge when the kitchen felt too exposed. She sat in an armchair, her phone open to the article, her eyes burning with unshed tears. The words cut deep: opportunist, seductress, schemer, reducing her years of grit and talent to a tawdry headline. She'd clawed her way from Harlem's hustle to the Culinary Institute, only to be smeared as a cliché. Worse, the photos exposed her vulnerability, Her feelings for Harrison lay bare for the world to judge. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Harrison in the doorway, his face a storm of guilt and resolve. "Imani," he began, his voice rough. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault." He crossed the room, stopping short as she stood, her arms crossed like armor. "Your fault?" she said, her voice steady but sharp. "They're calling me a gold digger, Harrison. My name, my work, it's all trash to them now. How do I face my granddad, my peers after this?" Her words trembled with pain, and Harrison felt them like a physical blow. "I'll fix it," he promised. "A statement, legal action, whatever it takes." "Fix it?" Imani's laugh was bitter. "You can't unring a bell, Harrison. This isn't just about you. It's my life, my reputation." She turned away, her fingers brushing a bookshelf, seeking something solid. Her hand paused on a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice, its spine cracked from use. As she pulled it out, a folded letter slipped to the floor, yellowed and delicate. Curious, she opened it, her eyes scanning the elegant script. It was dated 3 years ago, signed by Eleanor Hayes, Harrison's mother, and written days before the crash. The letter was a confession, a mother's regret poured onto paper. Eleanor wrote of Charlotte, her vibrant daughter, who'd fallen in love with a young chef from Brooklyn, a man of talent but no wealth. The Hayes family, fearing scandal, had pressured Charlotte to end it, threatening to cut her off. Eleanor had complied, believing it best, but the decision haunted her. "I broke her heart," she wrote, "and I fear it's hardened her. I pray you both find love that defies our world's cruel rules." Imani's breath caught, the words echoing her own fears. Was Charlotte behind the leak, driven by her own buried pain? She hesitated, then handed the letter to Harrison, her voice soft but urgent. "Read this." His eyes narrowed, but he took it, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he read. The letter was a window into a past he'd never known, a glimpse of Charlotte's hidden scars. "This explains a lot," he murmured, his voice thick, "but it doesn't excuse what's happening now." Imani shook her head, her mind racing. "What if Charlotte leaked the photos? To protect you or to keep me away?" "She's been cold since I started, Harrison. This feels personal." He wanted to deny it, to defend his sister, but the letter's weight and Charlotte's recent hostility gave him pause. "I'll talk to her," he said, but Imani stepped back, her eyes glistening. "I can't stay here, Harrison, not with this hanging over me. The tabloids, the rumors, it's too much. I need space to protect what's left of me." Her words were a knife, cutting through the fragile bond they'd built. Harrison reached for her, but she shook her head. "Don't. I'm going to my granddad's in Harlem. I'll call you." She moved to leave, but paused, pulling a pen from her pocket. On a slip of paper she wrote, "I don't want your name dragged through this. I'm sorry." She pressed it into his hand, her fingers trembling, then walked out, her footsteps echoing in the vast hall. Harrison stood frozen, the note crumpling in his fist, the letter from his mother heavy in his other hand. The library, once a sanctuary, felt like a tomb, its silence mocking his failure to protect Imani. He sank into the armchair, rereading the article, each word a fresh wound. The photos were too precise, the dance, the garden, the kiss. Someone had been watching, waiting. Charlotte's face flashed in his mind, her sharp comments about Imani, her protective streak twisted by past pain. He called her, his voice cold when she answered. "We need to talk. Now." She agreed to meet, her tone guarded, but Harrison's gut churned. If she'd done this, it wasn't just betrayal. It was a wound to the family they'd both fought to preserve. Meanwhile, Imani boarded a train to Harlem, her small suitcase at her side, the city's skyline fading behind her. The article played in her mind, but so did the letter, its words a haunting parallel to her own story. She'd come to the mansion to cook, to build a future, not to fall for a man whose world could crush her. Yet Harrison's kiss, his quiet vulnerability, had stirred something she couldn't deny. At her granddad's modest brownstone, Amos greeted her with a hug, his weathered hands steadying her. "Whatever's happened, baby girl, you're stronger than it," he said, his voice a balm. She nodded, but the weight of the scandal and the secret she now carried about Charlotte pressed down like a storm. Back at the mansion, Harrison stood alone, the note from Imani in his pocket, the letter from his mother on the desk. The gala's triumph was ashes now, overshadowed by a scandal that threatened to unravel everything. He'd built an empire, but Imani had awakened something more, a longing for connection he'd buried after the crash. Losing her, even temporarily, was a pain sharper than any business failure. As he stared at the skyline, resolve hardened within him. He'd find out who'd done this, confront Charlotte, and bring Imani back, not as his chef, but as the woman who'd made his heart beat again. The battle was just beginning, and he'd fight it with everything he had. The Hayes mansion stood like a silent sentinel under a gray Greenwich sky, its grandeur a hollow shell without Imani Carter's warmth. 3 days had passed since the tabloid scandal erupted, branding her a gold digger and shattering the fragile bond she'd woven with Harrison Hayes. The library letter, Eleanor Hayes' confession about Charlotte's lost love, burned in Harrison's mind, a clue to the betrayal that had driven Imani to Harlem. He sat in his office, the city skyline mocking his unrest. Imani's note, "I don't want your name dragged through this," crumpled in his fist. Her absence was a void, sharper than the loss of his parents, and the possibility that Charlotte, his only family, had orchestrated the leak cut deeper still. He needed answers, and he needed Imani back, not just as his chef, but as the woman who'd awakened his heart. Harrison's phone buzzed, Charlotte's name flashing. "I'm here," she said, her voice clipped when he answered. He'd summoned her to the mansion, his tone leaving no room for excuses. As he waited in the drawing room, its velvet drapes and antique furniture heavy with history, he steeled himself. Charlotte swept in, her crimson coat a stark contrast to her pale face, her green eyes wary. "What's this about, Harrison?" she asked, tossing her purse onto a chaise. "You've been avoiding me since the gala." He held up the letter, its yellowed edges trembling slightly in his hand. "This. Mom wrote it before she died. About you, Charlotte. About the chef you loved, the one the family forced you to leave." Her expression froze, a flash of pain crossing her features before she masked it with a scoff. "Ancient history. Why dredge it up now?" Harrison stepped closer, his voice low, controlled. "Because I think you leaked those photos of Imani and me. To protect me, maybe, or to punish her. Tell me I'm wrong." Charlotte's lips parted, but no words came. She turned away, her heels clicking on the parquet floor, her silence a confession. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she finally said, her voice breaking. "I saw you with her at the gala, Harrison. Dancing, kissing, like you were throwing away everything we've built. She's not one of us. I thought, if the world saw, you'd see reason." She faced him, tears glinting in her eyes. "I love Marco, a chef just like her. He was brilliant, but Dad said he'd ruin us. I let him go, and it broke me. I didn't want you to repeat my mistake." Harrison's chest tightened, anger warring with pity. "So you humiliated her? Destroyed her reputation to save me from a pain you chose?" Charlotte flinched, but her chin lifted defiantly. "You're all I have left. I couldn't watch you fall for someone who doesn't belong in our world." Her words echoed their mother's letter, a cycle of fear and control, but Harrison shook his head. "Imani's not Marco, and I'm not you. You had no right." He turned away, the rift between them widening, but Charlotte's sobs stopped him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for it to hurt her like this." The truth hung heavy, a wound laid bare, but Harrison's focus shifted to Imani. He needed to make this right, to bring her back. That afternoon, he drove to Harlem, the city's pulse a stark contrast to Greenwich's sterile calm. Amos Carter's brownstone was modest, its stoop lined with potted herbs, a testament to the man who'd raised Imani. Harrison knocked, his heart pounding, and Amos answered, his weathered face stern but kind. "Mr. Hayes," he said, stepping aside. "She's not here, but you'd better come in." The living room smelled of coffee and old books, photos of Imani's childhood lining the walls. Amos sat, his eyes assessing. "My girl's hurting," he said. "Those papers made her out to be something she ain't." "Why are you here?" Harrison leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Because I care about her, Mr. Carter. more than I've cared about anyone. I need to make this right. Amos studied him, then nodded. She's teaching a baking class online, her way of coping. Starts in an hour. You want her trust? Show up for her. Harrison seized the chance, registering for Imani's class under a pseudonym, James Wright, using his laptop in a Harlem cafe. The virtual session was intimate, Imani's face filling the screen as she demonstrated cinnamon rolls, her voice warm but strained. Harrison followed along, his hands clumsy with dough, his focus on her every word. When she announced an in-person follow-up at a Harlem community center, he knew he had to go. The next day, he stood in the back of the small kitchen classroom, apron tied, heart racing. Imani moved among the students, her smile professional until she reached him. Her eyes widened, recognition dawning. "Harrison?" she whispered, her voice a mix of shock and anger. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he said, keeping his voice low as others kneaded dough nearby. "I know about Charlotte. She leaked the photos, Imani. She's sorry, but that's not enough. I'm here to fix this." Imani's jaw tightened, her hands gripping a rolling pin. "You think showing up with flour on your face fixes anything?" "My name's ruined, Harrison. My granddad can't even look at the news." Her pain cut him, but he held her gaze. "I read the letter about Charlotte's past. I confronted her. She was wrong, but she's not the enemy. Let me help you rebuild." Imani hesitated, her eyes searching his. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Why, Harrison? Why go this far for me?" He swallowed, the truth rising like a tide. "Because you're not just my chef. You've changed me, Imani. I can't go back to the way things were." Her breath caught, but doubt lingered in her eyes. She turned away, addressing the class, but her hands trembled as she demonstrated the glaze. After the session, as students left with trays of rolls, Imani pulled Harrison aside. "You can't just waltz into my world and expect trust," she said, her voice firm but softer now. "But those rolls weren't half bad." A faint smile tugged at her lips, a crack in her armor. "Tell me about Charlotte. All of it." Harrison recounted the confrontation, Charlotte's confession about Marco, and her fear-driven betrayal. "She's broken, Imani, but she doesn't hate you. She's scared of losing me, like we lost our parents." Imani's eyes softened, the letter's weight resonating with her. "Your mom regretted what they did to Charlotte. I think she'd want you to choose differently." She paused, her voice barely audible. "But I'm scared, Harrison. If we try this, and it falls apart, I lose everything." He stepped closer, careful not to touch her, his voice steady. "I won't let that happen. I'll protect you, your name, your dreams. Give me a chance to prove it." She looked at him, the classroom quiet now, the scent of cinnamon lingering. "I need time," she said finally. "But don't disappear, okay?" Harrison nodded, relief flooding him. "I'm not going anywhere." As he left, carrying a tray of imperfect rolls, he felt a spark of hope. The truth had been faced, but the road ahead was uncertain. Charlotte's apology, Imani's trust, his own heart, they were battles yet to be won. Back at the mansion, Harrison found Charlotte waiting, her eyes red-rimmed. "I was wrong," she said, her voice raw. "I'll make it right with Imani somehow." Harrison studied her, seeing the sister he'd lost beneath her guarded exterior. "Start by being honest," he said. "With her, with me." She nodded, a fragile truce forming. The scandal still loomed, but Harrison's resolve was ironclad. He'd fight for Imani, for the life she'd shown him was possible. One cinnamon roll, one truth at a time. The Harlem brownstone of Amos Carter glowed with lamplight, its modest warmth a stark contrast to the cold grandeur of the Hayes mansion. Inside, the kitchen was alive with the clatter of pots and the rich aroma of simmering gumbo, a recipe Amos had perfected over decades. Imani Carter stood at the stove, stirring the pot with a wooden spoon, her dark curls loose around her shoulders. The scandal's sting lingered, its tabloid venom still tainting her name. But being home with her granddad grounded her. Yet her thoughts kept drifting to Harrison Hayes, his earnest face in the baking class, his confession about Charlotte's betrayal, the way his presence had cracked her defenses. She'd asked for time, But the pull of him, of what they could be, was a tide she couldn't outrun. Across town, Harrison sat in his Greenwich office, the skyline glittering beyond his window, a reminder of the empire he'd built, and the emptiness it couldn't fill. Amani's absence was a wound, her note, "I don't want your name dragged through this." A constant weight in his pocket. Charlotte's admission, her tearful apology for leaking the photos, had shaken him. But it was Amani's hesitation that haunted him most. He'd faced her in Harlem, bared his heart, and now he had to prove he meant it. His laptop was open to a draft proposal, not for Hayes Innovations, but for Amani. A plan to fund her dream restaurant, a way to erase the employer-employee barrier, and give her the freedom to choose him without fear. He drove to Harlem that evening, the proposal printed and tucked in his coat, his heart pounding with a vulnerability he'd never known. Amos answered the door, his eyes sharp but kind. "You again," he said, stepping aside. "She's in the kitchen. Don't mess this up, son." Harrison nodded, stepping into the brownstone's warmth, the scent of gumbo enveloping him like a welcome. Amani looked up from the stove, her expression a mix of surprise and wariness. "Harrison," she said, setting down her spoon, "you don't give up, do you?" "Not when it's worth fighting for," he replied, his voice steady but soft. He pulled out the proposal, placing it on the counter. "This is for you, not as your boss, but as someone who believes in you." Imani wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. It outlined funding for a restaurant, Amos's Kitchen, with her as sole creative director, Harrison as a silent investor. "You want to give me a restaurant?" she asked, incredulous. "Just like that?" "Not give," Harrison corrected, stepping closer. "Invest. Because you're brilliant, Imani. You deserve a stage for your talent, not my kitchen. And," he hesitated, his throat tightening, "I want you to be free to choose us, without worrying about your job or your future." Her breath caught, the weight of his words settling between them. She set the proposal down, her eyes searching his. "Why are you doing this, Harrison? Really?" He took a deep breath, the moment of truth arriving like a storm. "Because I love you, Imani," he said, his voice raw, unguarded. "You walked into my life and made it taste like something again. The mansion's empty without you. My life's empty without you. I'm not asking you to say it back, but I need you to know." The confession hung in the air, a fragile bridge between them. Amani's eyes glistened, her hands trembling as she turned back to the gumbo, stirring to hide her emotion. "You don't make this easy," she murmured, her voice thick. Amos, who'd been lingering in the doorway, cleared his throat. "Girl, you know what I think," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Happiness is worth a risk. You've been running from it long enough." He gave Harrison a nod, then retreated, leaving them alone. Amani faced Harrison, her expression torn. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The scandal, the tabloids, Charlotte's past. It's all so much. What if we crash and burn?" "Then we crash together," Harrison said, his eyes locked on hers. "But I think we could fly, Imani. I've never felt this before, and I know you feel it too." She bit her lip, the gumbo simmering behind her, its warmth mirroring the heat in her chest. "I do," she whispered, almost to herself. "But we need to go slow, Harrison. I need to trust this. Us." He nodded, relief flooding him. "As slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Amos returned, ushering in Charlotte Hayes, her crimson coat traded for a simple sweater, her face pale with nerves. Imani tensed, her hand gripping the counter, but Harrison stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Charlotte, you owe Imani more than words." Charlotte nodded, her eyes meeting Imani's with a vulnerability Harrison had never seen. "I was wrong," she said, her voice steady but raw. "I leaked the photos because I was scared. Scared of losing Harrison. Scared of him repeating my mistakes. I loved someone once, a chef like you, and my family tore us apart. I thought I was protecting him, but I hurt you, Imani. I'm so sorry." Imani studied her, the letters echoes in her mind. Eleanor's regret, Charlotte's pain. "I get why you did it," she said finally, her voice measured. "But you didn't just hurt me. You hurt Harrison too. Trust isn't fixed with an apology." Charlotte nodded, tears brimming. I know. That's why I want to help. Your restaurant, if you'll let me, I'd like to support it. Not for forgiveness, but because you deserve it. She pulled a folder from her bag, a list of contacts, suppliers, designers, PR firms. This is a start if you'll take it. Imani hesitated, glancing at Harrison, who gave her a subtle nod. I'll think about it, she said, taking the folder, her tone guarded but open. Charlotte exhaled, a weight, and stepped back. Thank you, she said, then looked at Harrison. I'll do better for both of you. She left, the door closing softly, leaving a fragile piece in her wake. Imani turned to Harrison, the gumbo now cooling, the kitchen quiet. This is a lot, she said, a small smile breaking through. You, Charlotte, a restaurant. It's overwhelming. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. Just come back to the mansion. It's not home without you. She looked at him, the man who'd bared his soul, and felt her walls soften. Okay, she said, her voice soft but certain. But we're taking it slow, Harrison. And I'm holding you to that restaurant plan. He grinned, the first unguarded smile she'd seen in days. Deal. They sat at the table, sharing bowls of gumbo, the flavors rich with Amos's legacy. As they ate, they talked, not of scandals or empires, but of small things. Her granddad's stories, his childhood summers, the cinnamon rolls they'd made. It was a beginning, tentative but real, built on trust and the promise of something more. Later, as Harrison drove back to Greenwich, the proposal folder beside him, he felt lighter, as if the mansion might finally become a home. Imani stayed with Amos, her heart fuller but still cautious. She looked at Charlotte's folder, its contents a bridge to a future she hadn't dared dream of. The scandal's shadow lingered, but with Harrison's love declared and Charlotte's apology offered, Imani felt a spark of hope. They'd face the world together, slowly, and maybe, just maybe, they'd build something that could withstand the storm. The Greenwich air carried a crisp autumn bite as the Hayes Innovations Charity Gala approached, its anticipation humming through the town like a live wire. The event, held at the exclusive Greenwich Country Club, was more than a fundraiser. It was a stage for power plays, where Manhattan's elite mingled with local tycoons, their smiles masking calculated agendas. For Harrison Hayes, it was a crucible. Weeks had passed since Imani Carter's return to the mansion, her tentative agreement to explore their connection, a fragile thread woven through late-night talks and shared meals. The scandal's venom still lingered, its tabloid echoes fading but not gone. Tonight, Harrison would stake a claim, not just for his company's legacy, but for the woman who'd rekindled his heart. He stood before his mirror, adjusting his tuxedo, his blue eyes resolute. This time, Imani would stand beside him, not as his chef, but as his partner. In the guest wing, Imani smoothed the skirt of her crimson gown, its bold hue a declaration against the whispers that had branded her a gold digger. The dress, a gift from Charlotte, tentative olive branch, clung to her curves, its elegance amplifying her natural grace. Her dark curls were swept up, a few tendrils framing her face, and her brown eyes gleamed with a mix of nerves and defiance. She'd cooked for these people, dazzled them with her art, but tonight she'd face them as Imani Carter, the woman Harrison loved. The weight of that love and the world's judgment pressed against her, but Amos' words echoed, "Happiness is worth a risk." She squared her shoulders, ready to step into the fire. The country club's ballroom was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers casting prisms across tables, draped in ivory silk. Guests swirled in designer finery, their laughter a polished veneer over their curiosity. Harrison arrived first, his presence commanding as he greeted investors, his smile practiced, but his eyes scanning for Imani. Charlotte was there, her emerald gown understated, her demeanor subdued since her apology. She'd promised to support Imani, but Harrison knew her loyalty was fragile, a thread that could snap under pressure. When Imani entered, the room seemed to pause, heads turning, whispers rising like a tide. She walked with purpose, her crimson gown a beacon, and Harrison's breath caught. She was radiant, unyielding, and his. He crossed the room, offering his arm, his voice low but firm. "You look incredible, Imani." She took his arm, her hands steady despite the eyes boring into them. Let's give them something to talk about, she murmured, a spark of mischief in her smile. They moved through the crowd, Harrison introducing her as Imani Carter, the visionary behind our gala's menu, and my partner. The word partner landed like a stone in a still pond, rippling through the guests. Some nodded politely, others raised eyebrows. But Imani held her head high, her warmth disarming even the most skeptical. The dinner began, Imani's menu, roasted quail with fig reduction, wild mushroom risotto, and chocolate hazelnut torte, drawing gasps of delight. Guests praised her, some genuinely, others with a condescending edge that made her jaw tighten. Harrison's hand brushed hers under the table, a silent anchor. But tension flared when Charlotte approached, her smile tight, her voice caring. Imani, the food's exquisite, as always. You've certainly made an impression. The pause was deliberate, a barb disguised as praise, and Imani's eyes narrowed. Thank you, Charlotte, she said, her tone cool but sharp. I aim to leave a mark. Charlotte's gaze flicked to Harrison, a challenge in her eyes. You've always been bold, Harrison, choosing unconventional paths. The implication hung heavy, and the table fell silent, guests leaning in. Harrison's jaw clenched, his voice cutting through the tension. Imani is the woman I love, Charlotte, and I won't let anyone, family or otherwise, disrespect her. His words were a blade, precise and unyielding, and Charlotte's face paled. She opened her mouth, then closed it, retreating to her seat, the air crackling with her unspoken retort. Imani squeezed Harrison's hand, her eyes gleaming with gratitude and something deeper. Trust, hard-won and fierce. The band struck up a waltz, and Harrison led Imani to the dance floor, their movements drawing every eye. You didn't have to do that, she whispered, her body close to his, the crimson gown swaying. Yes, I did, he replied, his hand firm on her waist. You're not a secret, Imani. You're my future. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the world was just them, the music, their steps, the heat of their connection. But the weight of the room's scrutiny pressed in, and Imani's smile faltered. They're watching us like hawks, she murmured. Harrison's eyes locked on hers. Let them. We're not hiding anymore. As the dance ended, a familiar figure approached. Edward Langston, a board member and family friend, his smile oily. Harrison, a bold choice, he said, glancing at Imani. But the press is hungry. Are you sure this arrangement is wise? Harrison's grip on Imani's hand tightened, his voice cold. My personal life isn't your concern, Edward. Imani's here to stay. Langston's smile didn't waver, but his eyes glinted with calculation, a reminder of the stakes. Imani felt a chill, but she met his gaze, refusing to shrink. Enjoy the tort, Mr. Langston, she said, her tone sweet but edged. It's my favorite. He chuckled, retreating, but the encounter left a shadow. Later, as guests mingled, Charlotte sought Imani out near the dessert table, her expression softer, almost contrite. I was out of line, she said, her voice low. I'm trying, Imani, but it's hard. You're not what I expected for him. Imani crossed her arms, her crimson gown catching the light. I'm not here to fit your expectations, Charlotte. I'm here for Harrison and for me. Charlotte nodded, pulling a small package from her clutch. A worn cookbook, its pages yellowed. This belonged to Marco, my chef, his recipes. I thought you might appreciate it. The gesture was raw, a peace offering born of pain, and Imani took it, her throat tight. Thank you, she said, meaning it. Charlotte's eyes held hers, a silent acknowledgement. Then she walked away, leaving Imani clutching the book like a talisman. The gala wound down, the crowd thinning, but the night's impact lingered. Harrison and Imani stepped onto the club's terrace, the autumn air cool against their skin. Stars dotted the sky, and the distant hum of Greenwich faded. You were magnificent tonight, Harrison said, his voice warm, his hand finding hers. I meant what I said. I love you, and I'm done hiding it. Imani looked at him, the man who'd fought for her in a room full of doubters, and felt her fears soften. I love you too, she said, the words a leap, a promise. But this world of yours, it's a lot. He nodded, pulling her close. We'll face it together. No more shadows. She leaned into him, the cookbook still in her hand, its weight a bridge between past and present. The tabloids would spin their tales, and Charlotte's truce was fragile, but Imani felt anchored. She was planning Amos's kitchen, her restaurant, with Charlotte's contacts and Harrison's faith fueling her. Tonight they declared their love to the world, and though the road ahead was fraught, board members, family ties, her own ambitions, she knew they'd walk it side by side. As they stood under the stars, Harrison's arm around her, Imani felt the future open, bold and bright, like the crimson of her gown against the night. 6 months had passed since the gala, where Harrison Hayes and Imani Carter stood defiant, their love declared under the scrutiny of Greenwich's elite. The Hayes mansion, once a cold mausoleum, now hummed with life, its halls softened by Imani's presence and the promise of a shared future. Tonight, the air in downtown Greenwich buzzed with anticipation as Amos's Kitchen, Imani's dream restaurant, prepared for its grand opening. The old Romano's building on 5th Street had been transformed, its brick walls now warm with amber lighting, wooden tables inviting, and an open kitchen where Imani's culinary magic would unfold. The scent of her signature cinnamon rolls wafted through the space, a nod to the morning that had sparked their bond. Imani, in a sleek black dress, her dark curls loose, moved with purpose, her heart racing with pride and nerves. This was her stage, her legacy, and Harrison was by her side. Harrison stood near the entrance, his tailored suit a quiet elegance, his blue eyes bright with admiration as he watched Imani direct her team. The past months had been a whirlwind, planning the restaurant, navigating the lingering whispers of the scandal, and rebuilding trust with Charlotte, whose support had grown steadier, if not perfect. Imani had insisted on a formal investment agreement, her lawyers ensuring her control over Amos's kitchen was absolute. Harrison had honored her independence, his faith in her unwavering. Their love had deepened through late-night talks over coffee, stolen kisses in the mansion's kitchen, and quiet moments where they learned each other's rhythms. Tonight, he felt a new weight in his pocket, a small velvet box, its contents a promise he'd never dared imagine until her. The restaurant was filled with guests, critics, locals, and Hayes Innovations allies, their chatter mingling with the clinking of glasses. Amos Carter stood in the front row, his weathered face beaming, his pride in Imani palpable. Charlotte, in a sapphire gown, hovered nearby, her presence a tentative bridge to reconciliation. The ribbon cutting loomed, and Imani took her place at the center, scissors in hand, Harrison at her side. "Ready?" he murmured, his hand brushing hers. She nodded, her smile radiant but nervous. "As I'll ever be." The crowd hushed as she spoke, her voice steady. "This is for my granddad, Amos, who taught me that food is love. Welcome to Amos' Kitchen." She cut the ribbon, and applause erupted, the doors swinging open to a new chapter. Guests flooded in, greeted by plates of Imani's creations, shrimp and grits reimagined with a modern flair, cornbread with honey butter, and those cinnamon rolls, their glaze spiked with bourbon and orange zest, hailed by early tasters as soul-touching. Critics scribbled notes, their forks busy, while locals raved, one calling the rolls a hug in every bite. Imani moved through the crowd, her laughter bright but her eyes scanning for flaws, her chef's instinct never at rest. Harrison watched, his heart swelling. She was a force and he was hers,